All right, we'll call to order the meeting for the Oklahoma City Post-Employment Benefits Trust for Monday, December 11, 2017. First item of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting from November the 13th, 2017. Did I say December 11th? Did I say that right? Today's the December 11th meeting. We're approving the minutes for November 13th, 2017.
Move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is to receive the investment report, performance review report for the period ending November 30th, 2017. Doug is not here today. The report, again, is very positive. If there are any questions, we can certainly get responses from Doug back to you. He will be here for our February meeting. So are there any questions on the report? Could I get a motion to receive the investment performance review report for the period ending December 30th, 2017? November 30th, 2017.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We don't need item 4. Item 5 is to approve the Second Amendment of the agreement between Oklahoma City Post-Employment Benefits Trust and NIHART for the actuarial services. And Matt Boggs is just going to give us a quick overview of the changes that we're approving today.
Yes, good morning. The changes really essentially come down to two simple facts. One, as you recall, we brought the COTPA employees into the Opebt earlier, and after the actuaries had taken a look at that, there are enough differences between the COTPA employees plan and the city Opebt plan that created enough differences that for financial reporting purposes they had to create some additional reports. After that fact, they did request additional compensation where we looked at that, saw that that was reasonable, and so what we're coming before you today partly is to ask for the approval for the $4,000 in the additional payments related to those services, specifically related to COTPA employees.
Matt, is COTPA going to reimburse the trust for that?
So on this one, what we're going to do is take it out of the general Opebt trust. We are going to work with accounting services and with the actuarial to determine, because when we came into this, we did not know that we didn't realize we'd have additional costs. And what generated the additional cost is that the COTPA plan members have such a different plan that it's difficult just to make a simple estimate of what the difference between the general Opebt plan and the COTPA Opebt plan is. And so I talked to Jason about it since we hadn't discussed this coming in and told him we'd do this out of the general Opebt trust this time. We're going to work to see if there's a way that we can reduce or eliminate that cost in the future, and if not, it'll come out of the Opebt out of the COTPA side in the future.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify on when we say there's a difference, enough difference in the plan, there's not difference in the plan design, there's differences in the eligibility for coverage.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
And they don't have the indemnity plan available to them. They only have the HMO plan.
Correct.
So it's the same HMO plan, but that's the only one they have available. And because of those differences, that's why we need to work through with accounting, the actuarial.
They can't run those numbers on the same set of formulas. It essentially have to carve that out and create almost two separate mini reports that were reported that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So could I get a motion?
Well,
oh, we had one more.
Yes, and so in light of that, one of the things that we looked at was the way our contract is written. For any time that we have changes, no matter the size of the change, we have to come back to the trust. And what we've proposed is allowing the general manager or designee to approve additional expenses that come about because of this, up to a total fiscal year contract cost of $25,000 in any fiscal year. So that would allow, if we have these small administrative issues that come up, that those can be approved by the general manager, and then that would come through in the regular course of business in your claims listing. That way, if anything would exceed $25,000, we would come before the trust, as typically has been the case.
I have a question about that. So when you say $25,000, you mean for the entire contract?
For the entire contract.
It's not a change amounting to $25,000.
That's right.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Move approval of the changes.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Matt. So the next item is, item 6 is acceptance of the annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2017. Jake Siebenaler is here from Accounting Services to present that information.
Good morning. I just have a short little prepared statement in regards to the financial. Presented for your approval are the audited June 30th, 2017 financials for the Post-Employment Benefits Trust. The financials you received were audited by AGH CPAs and advisors, along with the City of Oklahoma City's comprehensive annual financial report. In the auditor's opinion, the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the respective financial position of the trust as of June 30th, 2017. And the changes in the financial position for the years then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted. An unmodified, clean opinion was issued. Within the June 30th, 2017 audited financials, you will also find the required supplementary information, including a schedule of funding progress, a schedule of employer contributions, and notes to the required supplementary information. The actuarial report has also been added to the end of these financials. Along with the audited opinion, the auditors enclose an independent auditor's report on independent control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on the audit of the financial statements performed in accordance with the government account auditing standards. The results of these tests disclose no instances of noncompliance or other matters that were required to be reported under government auditing standards. As published in the audited report for the Post-Employment Benefit Trust, the net position for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017 was $49.13 million. This is an increase of $6.9 million over fiscal year ended June 30th, 2016, when the net position was $42.23 million. Are there any questions I can answer for you at this point?
So the one of the things I would mention, a couple things. First of all, with what Jake's talking about, that we did receive a clean audit on the financial reports in the unmodified opinion.
Yes,
that's basically what that
no
means,
issues.
and that's really positive. And there are no findings in the audit which would indicate that there's any irregularities or anything that's a major issue that was identified through the audit. And so that's a very positive thing, and I think a reflection of the great work that they do in accounting services, and I really do appreciate that and appreciate Jake specifically for the work that he does for us on this. Also, Jake, is it page, let's see, so this year there are new GASB standards that affect the plan. It's GASB 74.
Yes, sir.
Is this year, 75 will be next year, that
Yes,
affects
sir.
the city's financials. What is the best page to go back? I was looking at that earlier to see where that full accrued liability is recognized.
So if you go back towards, it's in the back section of the notes. It's probably some of the best ways to show it. If you go to page 23, it shows what the new net Opebt liability. So currently for fiscal
So if you turn to page 23, right?
yes, in the notes.
Okay.
So currently, under the old GASB 45 standards, we recorded net Opebt obligation, which is basically your future value of what you're going to have to pay out for post-employment benefits once retirees pass that retirement age. With the introduction in GASB 74 for the trust statements, we have to go through and implement what your new liability is going to be. It's basically a change in reporting purposes. So it will go through, and we'll get a new actuarial report that will go through and show that liability. We've done a lot of the implementation for it for the trust. That was in 74 for this current year. And next year, we'll start doing the one for the citywide. So we'll go through and eliminate the obligation, and then we'll go through and book a new liability starting in FY18 and then going forward. That total liability, as we've gone through and calculated now based off the actual report, is shown at the top of page 23 under section 4C, net Opebt liability. Shows you what that net Opebt liability of the $523 million kind of shows you where our base calculation is going to be at this year.
So the $523 million will show up on the city's financial statements as a liability next year. We had this similar.
I think it was
When
3
was-
years ago.
3 years ago
The
was-
retirement system implemented the same
Right.
thing.
So you had to recognize the full obligation of any net liability from your pension systems on the city's financial statements. And I want to say at that time, we ended up taking on about an extra $300 million
That sounds about
liability,
right.
something like that. Most of it came from the state system, and particularly from the state firefighter system. Well, with this now makes you recognize the full obligation, that full liability of future cost of health benefits for retirees on your financial statements, and you can see this will be in excess of $500 million liability that will hit our financial statements next year. And we've been talking with the audit committee about this and trying to make sure the council's aware of this. It's just a significant liability, and it really makes us recognize what kind of a long-term commitment and what kind of a financial obligation that has long-term for the city. And so it's just something that we've got to keep in front of ourselves, and something that we're going to continue looking to see how we can limit the amount of that liability. But it's something I wanted you all to be aware of, because you could get questions in the future on this as we move towards that implementation and it does finally hit the city's financial statements. So I just want to make sure we point that out as well.
We've already started working on the preliminary information for implementing 75, because we want to make sure we get ahead of this process so that we can get the full scope and coverage to make sure everything is correctly reported in plenty enough time so we can fully disclose any, all the financial ramifications of this.
Great.
I have just a quick question. Prior to this GASB change, what was the recognized liability? Was it 400?
The obligation that ran under the old city, at the top of page 22, under section 4B, annual OPEB costs. So that very first line shows for the citywide that very last column shows net OPEB obligation of $174 million. So that's what the old city's obligation was. So we go through and combine that one, and if you go down about 3 sections, there's a COPTA section. COPTA had an additional obligation of $191,000. So that puts us at about $200 million-ish.
So that was the amount that really would get recognized into, this year was recognized in our financial statements, and that's that net OPEB obligation, which is really saying what's your normal cost for OPEB plus what you haven't paid in the past of that normal cost. It's kind of amortizing that.
Yes.
And now, instead of just recognizing that portion, what we have to recognize is the full liability, right?
So is that the 400 million plus the 174?
The 174 is all that's recognized right now in the financial
the current
statements.
obligation, yes.
But under the new requirements?
The new one will be, I mean, we're going to take the current NOPEB obligation off, the 174 off, and then we're going to add $523 million back to it, so it's going to leave you a difference of $350 million, I think is what your change in liability, additional liability would be, because you're going to take the obligation off and then add the net OPEB liability back.
But your question was back to like the are you looking at the 418 or the 467?
Yes. I'm asking if that's where that number is derived from. Is that 467?
I don't know the link back to that. I know that's the basis of the actuarial accrued liability. To get to that total liability, I'm not sure if there's a schedule that draws the link between those two. Do you know, Jake?
No, sir, not off the top of my head. I'm sure we can get that
We
information.
will get an answer
I
for
can
you
get that
on that.
calculation.
We will get
that
an
back
answer
to
for you
exactly
on that.
That would be great. Thank
I
you.
can get that information to you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Can I get a motion to receive the financial reports? To accept the financial reports?
I move to accept the financial reports. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item is to receive the schedule of regular meetings, and those are in your packet. We had discussed last time that we were going to be moving to a quarterly basis of meeting, and that we had set the meeting so that on each one of those we could make sure that Doug would be here to report on a quarterly investment report, so we'd receive that quarterly investment report each time. So those are in there as February 12th, May 14th, August 13th, and November 19th of 2018.
Craig, I just want to mention that this meeting schedule is made to recognize the commitment that's made by the external trustees in attending these meetings, and that in the event that either one of them, Ted or Frank, should determine that they need a special meeting or that there's a concern, that certainly we could add a special meeting.
Absolutely.
I think that I would not want anybody who is covered by an Opebt trust action to think for a minute that we did not take this seriously and that we were reducing the number of meetings as a way of saying that we did not have a need to pay as close attention. We will be paying close attention, and particularly the external commissioners should mention if they feel the need for us to have a special meeting.
Yeah, and so we could schedule a special meeting if we had some contracting issue come up, if there were any issue that we had to have that. If a board member feels like there's a reason that they would like to see additional information, or if we wanted more educational opportunities with our investment consultants, that we can schedule special meetings, or if we came up with a situation where within one of our quarterly meetings we're not going to meet a quorum, we are going to reschedule, we'll make sure that we have that meeting. So I would echo Laura's comments there that we want to make sure that we meet the needs of those that are represented by this trust, and that we're carrying out our responsibilities as a trust.
And the other thing I just wanted to point out is in terms of monthly claims and payroll, the trust currently, the Board of Trustees, we currently ratify those. So that's not going to impact any payments that are made. So for anybody who might be listening, I wanted to make that clear. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So could I get a motion to receive the schedule of regular meetings for 2018? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is to ratify claims listing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then finally, any reports from trustees, staff, or interested parties?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce our new employee benefits manager. I can't even tell you how excited I am to say that. Christian York, who was recently promoted from the Office of Management and Budget. He was the Assistant Budget Director, and we are very excited to have him join the Personnel Department team. So you will be seeing him on a quarterly basis when we meet.
Yeah, this is bittersweet for me because
I was going to say, he looks familiar.
Yeah. We're losing Chris out of the finance department, which he's been just a great asset in the finance department. We really appreciate the work that he's done there. I do think this will be really good for the city for him coming in as benefits manager. It's a great challenge for him. I think he'll do a great job, and look forward to working with him further in this capacity too.
Mr. Chair, just one other question. Bob, I wanted to inquire about the business associate agreement. I inquired of Bob as to whether or not we had a business associate agreement with our external auditor. And the reason is we are adding Christian to some documents where our health insurance providers can provide information that may contain personal health information. And so we have to sign this document in terms of who our business associates are. And so I inquired of Bob as to whether or not, because I've never seen one, a business associate agreement with our external auditor, and I think Bob is going to be checking into that for me.
Right. This is a HIPAA requirement.
Yes.
For that relationship and for that type of information. I did check the contract that we have with AGH. I didn't see anything included with that, but I'll be having discussions with our controller to see if there's been some discussions in that regard, and we'll follow up with the trustees.
And so having said that, I think that going forward, whenever we approve those contracts, we need to make sure that there are business associate agreements attached to those.
Agreed.
Thanks, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other items? Hearing no other items, then we are adjourned at 10:18.